Welcome to the deep dive. We've gathered some really fascinating sources today. They focus on the extraordinary cognitive abilities of certain non-speaking individuals. If you've ever wondered about, the real limits of human consciousness, well, prepare for maybe a reset on that.
And today we're looking into claims that for many of these individuals, the sources often call them spellers because they type or use letterboards. Telepathy is, well, it's just the beginning. It seems to be an entry point to a whole range of spiritual and mental gifts. And the people involved, parents, therapists, they're suggesting these abilities are so profound, they really demand a completely new scientific way of thinking.
Right. So our mission today is to really analyze the evidence these sources are putting forward, the core idea that consciousness isn't just something the brain does, but maybe it's the foundation of the universe itself, like it came before matter and energy. And these sources argue that these spellers, they might be uniquely tuned into this, holding the key to, well, proving this new paradigm.
Mhm. And what's really pushing this kind of intellectual shift is that the current framework materialism just isn't cutting it anymore. For you listening, materialism is that long-held scientific idea that only physical stuff is real, right? The mind is just brain activity. But it completely falls apart when you try to explain things like documented precognition or clairvoyance.
Or even just the telepathy we started with.
Exactly. Materialism has no real explanation for that. But if you entertain the possibility that consciousness is primary, foundational, suddenly these abilities start to make a kind of logical sense, albeit, a paradigm-shattering one.
Okay, so to ground this, let's start with Amelia. She's sort of the central case study in a lot of this material. She's a 10-year-old girl, significant physical and developmental challenges. She has DDX3X syndrome, developmental delays, traits of autism.
And it's important to understand what DDX3X means here. It's a developmental disorder, yes, but it hits motor planning and physical control hard. It doesn't necessarily mean reduced intellectual capacity. But initially, doctors, schools, they looked at her non-speaking body and basically wrote her off, assumed she wasn't competent, maybe had an intellectual disability. The real tragedy was her mind was apparently brilliant and totally aware, just trapped, locked inside a body that wouldn't cooperate.
Until she learned to type. That was the breakthrough. Her mother, Maura, who works in advertising, so you figure, pretty logical, grounded person she described this moment. This dawning realization that Amelia wasn't just communicating, she was reading her mind.
Yeah, Maura talked about thinking a specific thought just to herself and then watching Amelia type that exact same thought. So Maura asked her directly, can you hear my thoughts? And Amelia typed back, yes. Initially, Maura thought, okay, maybe it's just a weird mother-daughter thing, a fluke. But she found out pretty quickly it wasn't just them. This kind of thing was surprisingly common in the speller community.
Okay, but you always need that external validation, right? Especially for the skeptics. Like her father, Mike. Former military, works with spreadsheets. You described him as practical. What finally convinced him?
It was this sheer specificity and just the accumulation of evidence. Like her teacher, Katie. She became convinced when Amelia used the computer and typed in Katie's personal password, a complex password, something she couldn't have possibly learned normally.
Wow.
And even more, Katie would sometimes just think a question in the middle of a busy classroom.
Yeah.
Maybe about the schedule or something, and Amelia would type the answer without a word being spoken.
Okay. And the therapist, Jode, also started as a skeptic, right? Therapists dealing with motor planning, they're usually pretty grounded in the physical.
Oh, absolutely. Joe's turnaround came from these two incredibly specific moments. First, Amelia somehow knew Jode had an oven fire over the weekend. Ruined a cake, apparently. Second, Jode arrived late one morning saying something like, "You won't believe why I'm late." And Amelia just typed, "3 turkeys."
3 turkeys.
3 turkeys. Jode confirmed, yep, 3 wild turkeys had blocked the road. According to the sources, it was these kinds of moments, hyper-specific, verifiable, external knowledge, that really started convincing that inner circle they were onto something, well, way beyond normal communication.
So, okay, telepathy is established as the baseline for them. But then the sources start talking about spiritual savants. This is where it goes beyond mind reading. We're talking clairvoyance, precognition.
Right, and the precognition claims, they're heavy. They carry a real emotional weight for the families involved. Amelia apparently gave these cryptic warnings days before that awful shooting at Robb Elementary School. She typed things about a boy killing children, being killed by police. Didn't make much sense at the time, but looking back, the detail was chillingly accurate.
That raises a huge point, though. If they're potentially accessing some kind of foundational consciousness where past, present, future coexist, That's an incredible burden. There was another example from Joe, the lawyer working with spellers.
Yes, Joe mentioned a young woman he worked with. She kept warning her father about slipping on ice, hurting his hip. The father, understandably, kind of dismissed it.
Yeah.
Fantasy, right? But then he goes on a business trip to Phoenix, Arizona, which basically never sees ice.
Right.
He slips, fractures his hip. It seems like for these spellers, this ability to see potential futures isn't just occasional, it might be constant.
And beyond seeing the future, Amelia's knowledge base, untaught knowledge, like understanding multiple languages, Spanish, Portuguese, Hebrew, hieroglyphics, even translating Hebrew on site.
Exactly. And the sources argue this is, like, direct evidence of tapping into that foundational consciousness. Amelia herself apparently said she was taught by God, or the gods, at night. Mora's theory, the mother's theory, is really interesting here. She thinks Amelia isn't translating words per se, because maybe fundamental consciousness doesn't have language like we do. Instead, she's focusing on the emotion, the meaning, the symbolism behind the words.
Okay, and that connects, doesn't it? It could explain their communication style. People describe it as poetic, wise, ancient, sort of, not of this earth.
Precisely. They're trying to translate pure, fundamental meaning into our clumsy human languages. It suggests their minds are working at a level of abstraction far beyond just vocabulary.
Which takes us into maybe the most sensitive area in these sources, talking to the deceased, like Amelia communicating with her Aunt Lori who passed away. How do the sources differentiate that from, say, Amelia just telepathically picking up memories from her parents' minds?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the sources tried to address it. With Aunt Lori, Amelia apparently rejected a photo of Lori when she was sick near the end. She only confirmed the communication when they showed her a photo of Lori looking healthy. And even more pointedly, Amelia supposedly conveyed a specific private memory to Mike's sister, Trish, her aunt, as a gift in her dreams. A memory Trish herself had apparently forgotten until Amelia brought it up. It's that specificity and the fact the memories weren't always top of mind for the living that led the sources to lean towards actual communication with a separate consciousness.
And we see that pattern elsewhere, too, like with Maria, the teacher.
Yes, Maria reported her students listing names of her deceased family members, saying they were in the room, and providing details about their lives together that the student just couldn't have known otherwise. It pushes the explanation beyond simple telepathy, according to these accounts, toward interaction with another realm.
Okay, so this is where validation becomes absolutely critical. These are huge claims. How did the sources, especially the more rigorous ones, vet the communication method itself? We know there's a history here.
Right, a difficult history.
Yeah.
Facilitated communication in the 90s had major issues. It was largely debunked.
Hmm.
So Joe, the former trial attorney you mentioned, he approached it like building a legal case. He went into trial lawyer mode.
What did he find?
Well, first he found that those early skeptical papers from the 90s, they'd basically been countered or superseded by over 100 later academic studies looking at the current methods, which are different. But the most compelling piece for him was a University of Virginia study, eye tracking. They tracked the speller's eye movements. And it showed, conclusively, the eye went to the letter first, then the finger followed.
Ah, okay, so the intention, the choice was coming before the physical movement.
Exactly. That finding was critical. It directly refuted the idea that the facilitator was subtly guiding the hand or cueing the response. The intention was clearly internal.
So there's the visual proof of intent. But Joe added another layer too, more psychological.
He did. He argued that, based on his experience, spellers are among the most honest people you could meet. He pointed out that lying is actually a complex act. It requires significant cognitive effort, motor planning. And because individuals with profound autism often struggle with precisely that kind of motor planning, the sheer effort needed to sustain a complex lie, especially about detailed past or future events, would be immense, almost impossible. They tend to just state what they perceive as truth.
Okay, let's shift slightly to intellectual access. This gives us maybe the clearest picture of that foundational consciousness idea. Asher, a man with autism, used to be verbal, then became mostly monosyllabic. But his intellectual access was reportedly astounding.
Yes, the claim is Asher could absorb the entire content of a book just by placing his hand on the cover, and then give a full, concise summary. His explanation, he said, when he moves out of body to what he calls the realms, it's like accessing this massive, universal library, a place where all knowledge is sourced, not just Earth knowledge, cosmic knowledge.
Wow. Okay, that reframes our whole idea of 3D existence, doesn't it? Asher's view is that our lives here, our experiences, they're actually expanding the cosmos. Every new thought, every piece of information we generate goes into this universal library, making it available to everyone else, especially those tuned in like the spellers.
And that shared consciousness idea, it even extends to a shared space. Amelia and two other spellers, Cody and Josiah, who actually met over Zoom, they all talk about the hill. Like, it's a specific place where people with autism gather spiritually without the limitations of their physical bodies.
And the really interesting part, the non-speller validation. Cody's facilitator, who's neurotypical.
Yes, she apparently was able to access the hill in a dream.
Hmm.
And her
As a trip.
description, perfect peace and joy. It lends weight to the idea that this isn't just a personal fantasy, but maybe a genuinely shared, accessible spiritual realm.
Okay, but these gifts, as incredible as they sound, they come with a serious downside, right? The sources mention this lack of a filter, a shield.
Absolutely. A lack of a strong dissociative boundary, they call it. Being constantly tuned in means they're flooded with uninvited knowledge. It leads to intense anxiety, exhaustion. It's overwhelming.
Just constant information overload. Amelia felt it acutely when her abilities became more known, people reaching out telepathically, strangers, like that example of a non-speaker named Gerald.
Yes, contacting her telepathically, typing, "I'm so lonely, I wish I would die."
Imagine carrying that kind of raw suffering from others, constantly.
It's an immense emotional toll. Amelia apparently felt deeply isolated, different. She identified with being the ugly unicorn or felt that deep melancholy in Kermit the Frog song, "It's not easy being green." Their brilliance seems intertwined with this profound sense of being alone in a world that just doesn't get it.
But the sources do shift back towards the potential, the positive side. The spellers themselves say they represent new science, new medicine, new technology, like Asher diagnosing his friend's headaches telepathically. That was remarkable.
Yeah, Asher apparently knew exactly what was wrong. He sent an image, damaged electrical wiring, and then the specific medical term, myelin sheath.
Mhm.
For you listening, the myelin sheath is like the insulation around nerve fibers. If it's damaged, signals misfire, causing major neurological problems. Asher diagnosed it correctly, even though the person receiving the information knew nothing about myelin sheaths. He just pulled it from that universal knowledge base.
So the vision for the future is quite something. Amelia wants to be a genetics doctor to help other nonverbal kids, despite everything. Which brings us back to the core idea, doesn't it? The ability to heal, see into other realms, tap into this foundational consciousness. It really demands a huge shift from us, from the neurotypical world, a philosophical leap.
Mora, Amelia's mom, put it perfectly. She compared it to the shift from believing the earth was flat to knowing it's round. It means letting go of that outdated materialist view and considering that maybe, just maybe, these non-speaking individuals we've historically underestimated, they might actually be the most spiritually and cognitively advanced among us.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? The sources really emphasize this, our willingness to believe them, to trust them. It's not just, nice emotional support. It actually seems to increase their ability to access and share these gifts. It's like a feedback loop. Trust enables capacity.
That's the key takeaway, really. When we offer spellers the basic dignity of belief, when we move past skepticism that's often just rooted in old paradigms,
Right.
we essentially unlock their potential, we help them access the realms, that vast library of consciousness, and maximize their ability to bring back potentially groundbreaking knowledge.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought to chew on, building on Asher's idea about the cosmos. If every single new thought, new insight we generate right here, right now, in our temporary 3D lives, if that immediately expands the universal library of knowledge for everyone, including these spiritual savants, then what responsibility do we have? What responsibility do we have to consciously cultivate the quality, the intention, the depth of our own thoughts, knowing they become part of this shared eternal resource? Something to think about until the next deep dive.